Welcome to the Cosmic Business Breakthrough Podcast. I'm your host, Sophia Palace, and this podcast is for soulful entrepreneurs who want to harness the cosmic power of astrology to elevate their message, unlock flow, and attract their best clients ever. Join me every week and get excited to discover how you can use the energy of the cosmos to get the business breakthrough you've been waiting for. Welcome to another episode of the Cosmic Business Breakthrough. Today, I am really happy and excited to be talking with an amazing guest about the planet Venus and how it shows up in our businesses in terms of our values and the way we attract and spend money, but most of all, how it shows up in our brand. So my guest today is the amazing Rhianna Jade. She is an intuitive astrologer, a holistic psychologist, a spiritual guide, a meditation teacher, and a wild and messy human. Her strength is supporting her clients to navigate change, whether it be processing a breakup, surrendering to a new love, changing careers, exploring spirituality, or anything else that requires courage and a desire to level up to a new phase of life. Her ultimate goal is to empower people to remember their own magic and reconnect to who they really are beneath all the layers of life and external noise. Through the unique lens of both psychology and astrology, she helps people step into their power to find the most meaningful, authentic, and soul-nourishing path possible. And she has a lot of laughs along the way because she believes healing doesn't always need to be dark and scary, and laughter truly is the best medicine. And we do laugh a lot in this episode. It is loads of fun. It was great fun to record and have a chat with Rhianna Jade. So I hope you love it. Listen in to the end because we do cover all 12 zodiac signs, and that is all the signs of Venus. And yeah, I would love to know what you think of this episode. So enjoy. I am really excited to have a chat with Rhianna Jade today. We're going to be talking all about Venus and how she shows up in your business, how she might show up in your values in business and how you spend money in business. And that's because Venus is our planet of not only love and beauty and relationships, but also our planet of our own magnetism, our attraction energy, our values. It's a big part of our personal brand. And it is also a big part of the way we attract and spend our money, which is a big issue in business. So I want to start by just welcoming you. Thank you so much for being here. Can you tell us a bit about your background, your journey into astrology or through astrology, how you got here, and what you love most about your Venus?
Okay, well, astrology for me has been lifelong. I feel like I was just kind of born with astrology in my blood, in my veins, in my soul. I was very fortunate to have a spiritually inclined mum. So I've been surrounded by astrology books since I was little and gobbling them up basically since as soon as I could read. So it really has been, 20, 25 plus years of just learning and loving of astrology. And it just feels really innately just true to me and just makes sense. And then as I got older, I also discovered psychology. This was while I was still at school, and just loved the idea of infusing human behavior with the teachings of astrology. And so I've just followed that path. I've just followed the threads and kept trusting that that's where I needed to be and what I needed to do. And it's just always continuing to unfold. And it's a never-ending rabbit hole, you would know, with your own dive into astrology, right? It's like you think you've mastered something and then you find this whole new avenue to explore. So I feel really fortunate that this is the work that I do because it's just never-ending learning and loving and living and breathing. So I just love it. And in terms of my Venus, I think that pretty much explains it right there with my Venus in the ninth house of learning and spirituality. So I just feel like I really get to live into my Venus every day, and she gets so nourished by the learning and the developing I get to do with myself and with clients with astrology on a day-to-day basis.
Awesome. Yes. And you do have a beautiful, happy Venus in Libra. And we are going to talk about, what signs Venus is most happy and productive in, and the signs that she struggles a little bit. But how do you find your own Venus in Libra? Like, what does that bring to your work? And also, what have you noticed with clients who have a similar placement, I guess? What does a person with Venus in Libra value in business?
Definitely the relationship side of things. I think with Venus, you can never really get away from relationships. And so it's about cultivating those relationships. And I find that it comes through in my work all the time. People are wanting to explore their relationships, even just the relationship to self. So it feels like this always exploring a connection and relationship with yourself, with a partner, with work, like what's the energy back and forth between what it is that you're wanting to explore. So I feel like that's how it really comes out. Even if there's not a strong Venus for my clients, it's like my Venus pulls it out of them, and that's what we kind of end up exploring in a way. So I think that's what I notice the most, that it's always just this energetic back and forth dance between how does this play out with that? How does this play out with that? And what are the relationships between all the moving parts and pieces?
Yes. In my experience, people with Venus in Libra have a very magnetic energy as well. Like they have that ability to attract people to them. And because Venus in Libra is so happy and so nourished and so bountiful, I suppose, it's like people want that Venusian energy, and that's what they come to you for. Is that what you find? Like, do you think that plays out in your business?
I think so, because I think the word that often gets mentioned to me is relatable. And isn't that just a Venus in Libra word right there, that it's like, oh, it's just so relatable. It's so easy to understand. Yes. Or it's so easy to, like, I've felt that too, or I've noticed that too. So, yeah, I think for sure, I've never really thought about it until you've put it on the table now. But yeah, I think for sure there's this relatable energy.
Yes. And people feel comfortable with you because Venus is also about comfort, isn't it? And when it's well placed, it's like, oh yeah, that just feels good. Like I just want to be around that. That feels good. Or I feel like she has what I need to feel good. That kind of vibe, which is lovely. And especially in the kind of work that you do, you want people to feel comfortable and connected and supported and all of those great Venus kind of words. Mm-hmm. So often I start my planet-based episodes with a little bit of mythology too. We kind of skipped over that. Although sometimes I think the mythology is a bit like intense often. Like last week we did an episode on Uranus, and it's fitting that this week's episode would be on Venus or Aphrodite because she came from the literal loins of Uranus. So the mythology of Venus is that she was created from the foam that rose out of the sea when Uranus's genitals were cut off by his son Kronos. And this is really interesting for me actually, because my mother's family comes from the island where Aphrodite was birthed from the foam. The island is called Kythera. It's not Cyprus where she landed later. On the, where she's on the shell and, springs from the foam. So it's an interesting thing to think about when you're thinking about the concept of Venus and the fact that she sprung from someone's genitals. But that's why Venus is often associated with sex and the powers of sexuality, the magnetism, the attraction. And there's a little bit of taboo, I suppose, with Venus because of that. I don't know. I'd love to know your thoughts because you're a traditional astrologer like me. What do you think about the mythology behind Venus? What can we learn from that to help us inform how Venus shows up for us?
My mind just immediately went to, isn't that such a Venus in Scorpio thing to hone in on, that it's the taboo essence? The mythology, often people ask me things like, how can so many different astrologers get so many different meanings from one thing? And this is what I often speak to, that there's archetypal astrology, there's the mythology. The mythology is not something that I've delved into super deeply. So my Libra Venus was just completely frothing then when you were teaching me about what Aphrodite and Venus is. But what came to mind when you asked that question was, yeah, taboo for sure. And I think just because we've been living in such a patriarchal society, it's veered more towards, I guess, Saturn, and Mars and all those energies. So I guess for sure the Venus energy could kind of be boxed into this taboo area or this untouched area.
Yeah. Well, the feminine, archetype being the taboo. Like, we don't talk about women's stuff.
Right. And so I think that's my interpretation of perhaps what you're speaking to there. But I feel like that's really changing now. And there's, this emergence of us really remembering and coming back to the call of the feminine and, rewilding and rewiring ourselves to remember to rest and to play and pleasure and all the luxurious things that Venus loves.
Yeah. So mythologically, forgetting how she was birthed, Venus or Aphrodite was responsible for lovemaking. That was her task from the gods. And if she was found to be working, she got in trouble. She wasn't allowed to work. So there was this sense of idleness or laziness about Venus. Also, that idea of how we rest, how we play comes from Venus as well. So sometimes we can, and I don't really think this is actually real in society today, that you can have too much Venus, because we don't, find that time for pleasure and, laziness. It feels so counterintuitive to a lot of us to embrace that side of ourselves. Yeah. And so that's, another reason why she can be a bit taboo, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely.
The part of Venus, I guess, that we use for business is describing those things that other people find attractive or magnetic or valuable about us or admirable about us without us really having to try. It's like it's there and we're exuding this energy without really realizing it. It's what's attracting people to us. And it's also showing us what we really value in our business. So that's why it's so important for branding. It is like, how we fluff our feathers, like as if we're, a bird, a peacock. Exactly. That's like the human equivalent of that. Yeah. So it's not only like how we attract, it's also what we're attracted to, what we value, and how do we magnetize people to us without even having to work for it, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So Venus shows up in different signs in different ways. Mm-hmm. And I think my belief is if you understand your Venus, you really get to know, what it is that people are attracted to about you, what it is you can amplify in your brand, what it is that you can amplify in your business in order to be able to kind of sit back and receive in that Venus principle, that feminine principle. But not all signs of Venus are equal. So we've talked about Venus in Libra, your Venus. Venus is at home in the sign of Libra. Mm-hmm. So it operates really well, which is fantastic. It's also at home in the sign of Taurus. So I'd love to know your take on Venus in Taurus and how that might show up in business.
Yeah, so I find Venus in Taurus, how I differentiate the two with the two home signs is Venus in Libra is more like the daytime, fun, playful, flirty energy, whereas Venus in Taurus is more like the nighttime, sensual, really grounded energy. And I think how it would play out, there'd be much more of a focus on grounded, practical ways of connecting and building the brand and the business, whereas that Libra Venus energy is more about how can I connect with people and get them talking about my business and relating to my business.
Yes.
So there's a slight difference in how the energies play out. And this is why it's so important to understand the themes of elements and how an earth sign versus an air sign plays out. I really love Venus in Taurus. I think because I don't have a lot of earth sign in my chart, I just really gravitate to anything that's really earthy and grounding. So I think Venus in Taurus is a really beautiful placement for attracting wealth and money. It's a much more money focused way of working with Venus, not in a gross greedy way. It's just, I think it attracts wealth and money slightly more than Venus in Libra would, which is more about attracting clients, which then in turn creates money, right? But there's just deviation in how you work with it. And I think the branding, if I just think of it in that way, with my Venus Libra, I love my branding to be really pretty, really beautiful, really feminine. I feel like with Venus in Taurus, it would be more like earthy tones, the greens, the browns, and there would just be a slight deviation in that way too. So it's really fun to play around with your Venus and to work with her and nourish her, and then notice how that nourishes your business as well.
Yeah, for sure. And, personally, obviously, I love Taurus energy, Taurus rising, but absolutely, I think that the Taurus Venus is, values material security a lot. So can be, very good, or, can be quite good with money, can be quite good with accumulating wealth. And it also loves a bit of luxury too. So, that can be part of your branding too. If you have Venus in Taurus and you love the luxe, like go there for sure. Like feel that wealthy vibe. Like that's what I love that. Not only that earthy groundedness, but also that luxurious idea of, the Venus in Taurus, that real, as you said, real connected with the senses and sensuality, but also the money. Very nice. So the other place where Venus is really happy is in the sign of Pisces, where it's exalted or, uplifted. So what's your experience or thinking around people with Venus in Pisces and how they might use that might show up for them in business?
It just feels really Neptunian whenever I see or relate to Venus in Pisces. This is for the creatives, the dreamers, the poets, the musicians, the artists. So this would really nourish that, right? Nourish the creative energy of your business and really allow time for that. But I just even notice for myself during Pisces season, or when Venus is in Pisces, I'm much more inclined to, I guess, lean into the more playful, luxurious, or lazy, in inverted commas, for those who are listening. Like, it's more playful and less about I've got to accumulate wealth and I've got to accumulate clients, and how can I play into the creativity and the wealth that comes from being in the creative container of the business.
Yes. There's such a strong creative energy with Venus in Pisces. And I was just talking to a friend yesterday who has Venus in Pisces about her, ability to really kind of capture that beauty even with other people's brands. That's what she does. But, that ability to really draw out the beauty, like use that Venus to really draw out the beauty, not only of her own brand, but of other people's brands. And I think that speaks to like that Neptunian or watery side of Pisces, that they're kind of really connected in with everything. Yeah. So that ability to kind of draw on and draw things towards them, I think is really powerful with a Venus in Pisces.
Yeah. Such a beautiful placement.
Okay, so we talked about the good stuff. Let's talk about the challenging places of Venus. Obviously, I have some experience with this, but because we started with Venus in Libra, let's do the opposite of that. So the opposite sign to Libra is Aries. So Aries, if you have Venus in Aries, your Venus is in what's called its detriment, which doesn't mean it's bad. It just means that it can have a couple of challenges, and those things can be actually really powerful things in your life because you've had to work with it your whole life. So a planet in detriment is not necessarily a bad thing. It can actually be your superpower. But let's talk about Venus in Aries. What does that look like? What does that show up like in business as well?
I think Venus in Aries for business is great in terms of, this bold, dynamic way of working. You may need to work alone more than with others. Aries likes to do things their way, but that's not a bad thing either, right? So this is where I never say good or bad placements. I liked how you use the word challenging. So Venus in Aries is dynamic, it's bold, it needs to be able to take lead and take charge. And the way I always teach, right, even with the psychology, is how can you flip that and make that your superpower? Because we live in a world where sometimes a lot of people struggle socially and struggle to be assertive and to be seen. So this is a really powerful quality to have, to be able to be bold and dynamic and lead. And then you can actually teach others how to do that also.
Yes.
step up and step into leading qualities, daring qualities, courageous qualities.
Yeah, I love that. And yeah, I have a client who has done exactly that really recently, where she's really embraced that Venus in Aries and just had this complete shift from, thinking, because, and this is the interesting part, obviously Venus and the sun move quite closely together. So this particular client is a Pisces sun sign. So she always felt like, being bold wasn't supposed to fit with her personality as a Pisces. But with Venus in Aries, that boldness needs to come out. It needs to be expressed. There's this real need for, those Aries qualities to come out, the enthusiasm, now she's changed her brand and it's very red and black and really kind of fiery and exciting. So the Venus in Aries can be really powerful, but yes, it's got that contrast with the Venus in Libra, which wants to connect and magnetize, whereas Venus in Aries really wants to go after things. It really wants to do, and it does have that independence and that, want to, even a little bit of competitiveness, I suppose, is that Aries energy, but that can be really great in business, as you said, as well. Yeah. So Venus in Scorpio is another place where Venus is a little bit challenged because Scorpio is opposite Taurus. So again, Venus is at home in Taurus and the opposite sign is where she's in her detriment or challenge. And I personally have Venus in Scorpio. And I'd love your thoughts on it, and then I'll give my personal take.
Yeah, see, Venus in Scorpio, I mean, I don't really see it as challenging, but I think that's because I've got so many Scorpio.
So much Scorpio.
That it's just like, oh, yeah, I totally understand that. The way I always explain it to clients with Venus in Scorpio is you don't do superficial. So you need a really deep connection, if we're talking in business, to the work that you do. And you really want to dig beneath the surface and really help people transform and transcend. And I think that's a beautiful quality in business. It may be a little more challenging in your personal life if the people around you aren't necessarily wanting to go that deep. But what a beautiful energy you can bring to the work that you do to create really great results for your clients.
Yes. And we talked a little bit before we started recording about my journey over the past few years. And I think that, my natal Venus in Scorpio has kind of evolved over the past few years. I've unleashed her a little bit more because, I always had quite an intimate relationship with my clients, as in, as a copywriter, as a marketer, but particularly as a writer, you have to get in people's heads. You really have to connect with their psyche in order to write for them. Or that's how I approached it, probably because of my Venus in Scorpio. But it wasn't until the past sort of 3 years where I realized that, I wanted that even more deep understanding of people, that even deeper connection with people. And that's what I get through astrology, like by merging the astrology with the work. I don't think you can be superficial with astrology. Like, it's just, unless you're just reading the sun signs in the magazine, like once you go into astrology, there is nothing surface level about it. It is all the layers. And so that's, my Venus is very happy doing what it does now. And I think that doesn't mean if you have Venus in Scorpio, you have to be an astrologer. But I think what you're probably craving is that deeper connection, as you said, with your clients and even in relationships in general, that ability to have those deep transformative conversations with people. And, I've always been a person who didn't like small talk. I just don't do that. Let's talk about the universe. Let's talk about all the other things. Let's not talk about the weather. But those are the things that you can embrace, I guess, if you have Venus in Scorpio. Like, just own it. That's the beauty of Scorpio in general. It's the sign that just owns the shit. Like, it's like, let's just own it. Own all of it. Like, it doesn't have to be all sunshine and rainbows. In fact, we love it when it's not. Like, we love uncovering all of the dark stuff. And okay, so the other sign where Venus is challenged is Venus in Virgo. So Venus opposite Pisces in Virgo is in its fall. So it's a little bit, again, challenged here. What's your experience of Venus in Virgo and how it shows up?
With Venus in Virgo, it's funny, whenever I work with Pisces energy, the first thing I'm teaching is boundaries, right? And I feel like it's needed for Venus in Virgo as well. Virgo is always the helper, the giver. And so I guess with Venus in Virgo, I've always kind of thought, I don't feel like it's in detriment in a lot of ways, because it kind of vibes with Libra energy, and that it's all about we and the other as opposed to being about the self. But I think where it can get challenged is that it forgets to bring it back to the self and to allow that love and that helping and that service energy to come back to fill up their own cup. So with Venus in Virgo, it's about finding the balance, right? And this is a kind of Libra and Venus energy. If we think of the scales, find the balance between serving others and serving yourself, or helping others and helping yourself, and really grounding it using those earthy qualities, grounding it into something tangible and practical, because I guess the flip side of Virgo that I always notice is anxiety and overwhelm. It's like they can see all the things that need to happen and all the things that need to be connected. And then suddenly it becomes like, oh my goodness, where do I even start with this? So really needing to ground it with the earthy element so that they can make really good progress rather than just ending up in a big overwhelmed mess.
Yeah, absolutely. Something that I notice about some Venus in Virgo people, especially in business, is that they make Venus their work, because Virgo is that service-based sign. It wants to help, it wants to serve, but also it can overwork. It can go into that overwork mode. And I think for a lot of people with Venus in Virgo, there can be this tendency to make Venus their work, as in, they can be really amazing at, for instance, makeup, beauty, like they can, because they're so detail oriented, they can be like, let's work on this. They could be amazing artists too, but I have a friend with Venus in Virgo who's absolutely loves jewelry and has this eye for design, this eye for quality.
And the detail.
The details. Yes, exactly. And it's like, I see that, I would go to her if I wanted advice on jewelry, for instance, because she's got such a good eye for it. And another Venus in Virgo friend, I would talk to about makeup, because she's like just amazing at it, knows all the things, knows all the details, And that's a beautiful thing about Venus in Virgo, but that also means that they can forget that other side of Venus, which is the play and the fun and the rest, because they make Venus their work. Yeah. So, that's a kind of a Virgo trait, isn't it? To kind of turn everything into a job.
Exactly. And resentment kicks in. That's probably the other big word that can come up when we're falling into, I guess, the less than stellar qualities of a sign.
Yes. But it can be amazing in your, if you do have Venus in Virgo, that can mean that you can have a really beautiful, really well curated brand. Like it can be amazing for branding. But it's important to not let it consume you or take over your, everything that you do, I suppose, when you have that placement. Okay, so we've covered the really well functional Venus and the slightly challenged Venus that we've got to work with. What are some other interesting placements of Venus? We may be able to talk about the rest of the signs.
Well, for some reason, Venus in Aquarius is really coming to mind.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Tell us about Venus in Aquarius.
At the moment, because I think that, the rebellion, the change maker, the really wanting to do things quirky and a little bit differently. I don't know why. I just thought I'd follow that thread that Aquarius was the first thing that came to mind. And I think she can really help Venus express her way really differently, really uniquely. And I guess with my Aquarius rising, maybe that's why I just really value rebellion and doing things differently and uniquely. So I always think that's quite a fun placement for people.
Yeah. Yeah. And Venus in Aquarius, people are attracted to unusual things as well. They don't want to do things necessarily the way everybody else does them. Their branding might be a little bit unique, but also Venus in Aquarius, I think, the branding and the business can often be about a movement. It's because it's like bigger than them. It's got to be about something bigger than them, something about the collective. And yeah, I'm thinking of one client in particular who's got Venus in Aquarius, and you know, her business is a movement. Like, it's not just about her; it's about, you know, this collective change that she's trying to create, which is a very Aquarius theme.
Mm.
What about Venus in Gemini? Speaking of air signs.
Yeah, chatty.
Yes.
Venus in Gemini, communication, right? Like really selling even through their words, really connecting with clients and people through their words, and really helping other people find their voice and their words as well. I find Venus in Gemini really fun. They'd definitely be the people you want to be around at parties, for sure. They just have this really beautiful and charming way of connecting with others. But it can, I guess, sometimes be a little bit more surface level. It's that Gemini is really known for knowing like so much about so many things. So it doesn't mean that they're not the master of anything, but it's more they've got their finger in so many different pies because they're just so curious and inquisitive about everything.
Yeah, I think that curiosity is a big value of a Gemini Venus. Like, always being curious is, you know, a trait, but also like something that they value highly. And the people that I have worked with Venus in Gemini are really great at messaging. Like, that is often part of their business. And, you know, that ability to, I guess, hone in on a strong message, that ability to network with people and, you know, pull ideas out of all sorts of random places. It's a great Venus for any kind of advertising. Like, it's just got that, it's got that energy. It's also like gets bored easily. So it's got to be stimulated. Your Venus in Gemini has got to be stimulated with plenty of fresh ideas and fresh content. But I imagine a Venus in Gemini, I just think, you know, of the content creators out there with Venus in Gemini.
Yeah,
we can all be jealous of that, you know.
Yeah, you don't necessarily need to what's the word I'm looking for here? Like, follow through. You want the Venus in Taurus near you to then follow through with all the ideas. But you want the Venus in Gemini person there to really spark and initiate.
Yes, for sure. They have all of those sparks and those ideas, and the content flows, but they don't necessarily have the follow through. Exactly. What about so we've talked about Libra, Gemini, and Aquarius, which covered the air signs. What about the water signs? So Venus in Cancer. How does that present itself in business?
Just with personal experience with that, my mum's got a Venus in Cancer, and she's just so nurturing and nourishing. Like, for her, it's all about those really Cancerian qualities, like, let me feed you, let me help you, let me nurture you, let me nourish you. And certainly a love language, if someone kind of turns around and nurtures and nourishes her as well, it's just like she's so lit up. So I think the Venus in Cancer energy, it's that really connect to your gift of empathy and emotionality. If you were utilizing your Venus in business, it's about how can I create this emotional connection with my clients, and how can I help my clients connect emotionally to what they do as well. And then that's where the abundance flows in, when you're really connected in this emotional, intuitive way.
Yes. And Venus in Cancer can also be quite good with money, because it is another sign that's focused on security. So it can be, you know, quite good with property, things like property investments. Not that necessarily where, you know, I mean, your business could be about property. That would be great for a Venus in Cancer. But, you know, Donald Trump, for instance, he has Venus in Cancer, you know, so I'm pretty sure he does, because he's a Gemini, right? My notes say that he's got Venus in Cancer, so could be wrong. But, you know, like, there's that sense of, you know, that ability to accumulate wealth there with a Cancer Venus too. So use, like, as you said, that emotional connectivity, that ability to intuit, you know, what's going on for people, to nourish people, all of that stuff is what people will be naturally attracted to you for, but also that's your superpower in your branding as well.
Yeah.
So, and because we've already talked about Pisces and Scorpio, we've covered the water signs. So we have Leo Venus. Venus. What do you think about this?
Bold and dynamic. Whenever I see Leo Venus with a client, I really encourage them to really own that want and wish to be adored and to be seen, and to not shy away from that, because that's when then they're not nourishing their Venus, and then things just aren't. You want to really nourish your Venus so that you can magnetize and create abundance. So it's like, be showy, be brilliant, dare to shine really brightly. So then others are like, oh my God, wow, maybe I can do that too. So I see it as a really beautiful thing. You probably might need to keep it in check with some other planets in your chart.
Depends on the rest. Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
Can be a really beautiful, bold, dynamic energy, especially in business.
Yeah, and there's a real luxury with Venus Leo as well. You can really use that in your branding, in a different way to the Taurus Lux. I think the Leo Lux is that showiness, and that's great. Like if that works for you, use it. There's that sense of romance and charm that goes along with Leos, and that idea of just, let the sun shine on you, because people are attracted to that about you. Leo energy, pulls people in like moths to a flame, right? We want to go to the sun. We naturally are attracted to those people with the sun on them, and that helps other people shine themselves. Like that highlights what they want to shine about themselves. So, you might be known for giving lavish gifts or, that kind of thing. That might be part of your brand too. Yeah, like Madonna had a Leo Venus. So that makes sense. Libra, Scorpio, Virgo, Sagittarius Venus.
Yeah, this is a fun one. This is, these are the people that are really seeking truth and adventure. You think about the quintessential qualities of Sagittarius. They're the teacher of the zodiac. So they really want to be learning from the people around them and teaching. So really embracing cultures, learning philosophy, spirituality, all of the things, and really nourishing Venus in that way. And they certainly don't like to be boxed in. It's almost similar to Aquarius sometimes in that it's really I'm just getting this like spread their wings energy and allow themselves to have fun and be really playful with their business.
Yeah, there's definitely a playful energy to the Venus in Sagittarius. Like, don't take it too seriously, even though they take philosophy and wisdom and learning very seriously. There is this sense of like, but it's also got to be fun. It's got to be uplifting in in some way. And that's what people are attracted to about you as well. That kind of, if you've got Venus in Sag, that ability to really bring the joy and bring the fun. And, I would amp that up in your brand if you've got Sag there. And also, that focus on connecting people with wisdom, connecting people with knowledge, and culture and that kind of thing, those very Sagittarian qualities. Those are probably things that you value. You probably value a bit of adventure. Maybe that might be part of your brand. There can be that. There's that duality, I guess, to Sagittarius. If part of it is about, knowledge seeking, and the other part of it is like adventure and exploration. And so it can be, maybe part of your personality is that you like to go on off-road, mountain biking or whatever you like to do. Bring that into your brand, because that is very Venus in Sagittarius as well.
And I think with all the fire signs, right, it just feels enthusiastic. Like there's just this enthusiasm to all of them, and really allowing yourself to lean into that and not dampen that down. I think with a lot of the fire signs, it's often, but I'm going to be too much. Like, no, actually own that too muchness. That's your selling point.
Yeah, absolutely. That is it. Yeah. Amp it up.
Amp it up. Exactly.
All right. I think we might only have Venus in Capricorn left. That sound right? We didn't do these in order. So forgive me if we've forgotten a sign, but let's talk about Venus in Capricorn. What does this look like? What does this show up like?
It's very practical. One of my teachers, actually, she has Venus in Capricorn, and she kind of is always like, oh, Venus in Capricorn. But I think it's a beautiful placement. I think you can for sure bring the luxury in, this want for wealth and abundance, but in a really yummy, practical way. And it feels very, this feels more like a Leo word, but it feels very regal. I feel Venus
Yeah.
in
Okay.
Capricorn, and just really owning the more serious side of, well, no, I want my relationships and my business to be practical and long term, and I'm in this for the long haul, and I'm doing this in a really measured way. And I think people really stand up and listen to Capricorn energy. So really owning that with your Venus Capricorn.
Yeah, I heard a Venus in Capricorn described once as, they will always be able to spot the fake. Like if you've got a lineup of handbags, they will always be able to spot the fake Louis Vuitton or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I think what it is about Venus in Capricorn is that it's about integrity in business, and it's not about like necessarily showing off wealth like it might be with a Leo Venus. It's about, is my brand in integrity with who I am? Like they're not necessarily going to be the most showy, because if you've got a Venus in Capricorn, your brand doesn't need to be, you don't need to be perfect all the time. I don't think that that's a part of the Capricorn energy. I think it's more about, is my brand in integrity with who I really am? Because you will feel, if you've got Venus in Capricorn, you will feel very off if you're presenting yourself in a way that doesn't feel like you. But also, you're not going to be sloppy. There's nothing sloppy about a Venus in Capricorn, like even like authenticity to you is not about, showing up without makeup on and in your PJs. It's more about, being well put together, but not being over the top. You might not be the person with the full face of makeup either. You're going to be that person who wants to show up in your brand in a very integral kind of way. And again, similar to the Virgo Venus, there can be that sense of having to work hard at the Venus things and therefore forgetting a little bit of the goodness of Venus as well, a bit of the not allowing yourself the Venusian pleasures as much as some of the other signs might.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, there's definitely a bit with a Venus in Capricorn has that natural talent for organizing, that practical sense. And that's what people are probably attracted to you for, is your integrity, your practicality, your organizational ability, but you've got to be able to have fun too. So yes. So I love that. Do you have any other thoughts on Venus energy and, how we can, I guess, embrace it more in our businesses, in our lives in general? Like, how do we make the most of Venus?
I think it's coming back to values, right? And really learning the qualities of Venus. And like I said at the start of the call, I think most people go, oh, Venus, love, relationships, but bring that back to, but what do you love? And this is the values quality, right? And when you're in alignment with your values and you're nourishing your Venus, everything becomes really nourished and balanced. Maybe it's my Libra Venus, but I always just bring it back to balance. It's like, how can I balance out the fun, the play, the luxury side of Venus? And then how can I balance out the really nourishing and then being able to serve from the energy of Venus and how that works in business as well. But Venus is such a fun placement to play with. And if we had longer, learning about the aspects that she's making and the puzzles that she's ruling in your chart, you can go so deep. Well, you can go deep with everything in astrology, right? But you can go so deep just with one placement.
Yeah, for sure. And yes, like we've only just touched on the signs, and there's a whole other part of looking at Venus in your chart, which is looking at the house it's in and the aspects it's making and, how that might show up for you differently. But it has been such a joy to have this chat with you today. Even though it's a Wednesday, it feels very Venus Day vibes. So thank you so much. Tell us what's going on for you in your business at the moment. Is there anything that you want our listeners to know about that you're putting out there? I know it's your birthday week, so It's a little bit quiet, but
well, actually, yeah, this year's been a big one for business. I'm really stepping into Venus Libra, actually. So, launching my website and really stepping into the astrology side of myself, I had to really focus on my Aries moon and have the courage to really put myself out there. And then this year, it's really moving into my Venus Libra in the 9th house, which is more about teaching and philosophy. So I've moved this year into creating courses and masterclasses and online containers and spaces. So that's been really fun, shifting into that this year and working more in that space and that arena. And I've been working a lot with branding and design. So my Venus has been feeling very nourished. So it's been a much more creative year this year for my business. So I'm really excited to start to launch all the things that have been percolating in the background.
Yeah, exciting times. Well, we will link to Rihanna Jade's website in the show notes. And I saw you have an amazing eclipse workshop at the moment as well for anyone. And eclipse energy hangs around. So, you know, we might be needing this in the weeks to come.
This time round, I was going to take a breather, but it just really wanted to come out and be birthed. So it's there on the website for people to utilize. There's lots of nourishing little strategies and tips and tools.
Thanks for joining me on the Cosmic Business Breakthrough. If you'd like to learn more about what I do, head to sophiapalace.com or follow me at Sophia Palace over on Instagram. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, I'd love for you to take a moment and review the show if you found it helpful and share it with a few friends. Thanks again, and I'll speak to you next time.